After the Night King left Kevin's apartment, he got a call from Miss Wilson to tell him about a banquet he needed to attend as a representative of Williams Media. She insisted that it would help the company's image if he showed up for it. But Kevin really wanted to practice the techniques that the Night King had spent the past 2 weeks teaching him. "You're not giving me much of a choice," Kevin told her. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Please don't misunderstand me, Mr. Williams. I didn't mean to pressure you," she replied anxiously. "Just stop by at Corwin Tower to pick me up later," Kevin said as he hung up the phone. At the same moment, Lily had just finished her live broadcast and was walking out of her home studio with a broad smile. It had been 2 weeks since Mighty Moose had tipped her tens of thousands of dollars during her show. This had attracted a lot more viewers and the popularity of her live broadcast skyrocketed. "You must be tired, Lily. Do you want some fruit?" Dorothy asked as she smiled and walked her daughter to the sofa to sit down. Lily had been the only wage earner in the house lately, and it made Dorothy happy to see her daughter doing so well. "I'd like to discuss something with you," Dorothy said. "Now that you're a celebrity, why don't you buy a bigger place? It would be more convenient for your live streams if we had some extra room." Dorothy wasn't worried about upsetting Lily when she said, "And when that piece of trash Kevin gets out of prison, he won't be able to find us." Lily was making at least $100,000 a day on the Williams payroll, plus whatever her fans sent her. She could easily afford a new place. When she thought about Kevin, Lily's eyes started to well up with tears. "Do you have a particular place in mind?" she asked her mother. "I heard that the Salix Leaf Hotel complex that Rachel is managing has just finished some new condos," Dorothy said with a smile. "I saw some ads for them yesterday and they're really beautiful." Lily had also heard about the condos that were being built next to the Salix Leaf Hotel, and she liked the idea. It was probably the best location in Chicago and the buildings were gorgeous. Some people even thought they were nicer than the condos in Corwin Tower. But they were still very expensive and cost more than double what you would pay in other parts of the city. "It's nice, but isn't it a little pricey?" Lily asked hesitantly. "Well, let's find out," Dorothy said as she called Rachel. As soon as the call connected, Dorothy got right to the point. "Hi, Rachel. We're wondering if there are any more condos left at your property." "Yes, we still have a few. If you're interested, come down and take a look. I'll show them to you myself. It will give me a chance to stretch my legs," Rachel replied with a smile. "Okay, we'll be down there in a little while." Then Dorothy hung up the phone and let Lily know that it was all set before going to the other room to change. Less than an hour later, they both arrived at the sales office and saw Rachel waiting for them by the door. "You're getting prettier every time I see you, Rachel," Dorothy said with a smile. "Oh, please don't flatter me. Then let me show you our condos," Rachel said as she took Lily by the arm. "Wait a second. How can I be seen with the most desirable single woman in Chicago?" Lily asked with a mischievous grin. "What's Lily talking about?" Rachel said to Dorothy as she reached out and playfully pinched Lily's arm. "She's just teasing you," Dorothy laughed. Rachel was now very famous all across Chicago, and they were constantly hounding her for TV and fashion magazine interviews. A few minutes later, when they got to the condominium area of the property, Lily and Dorothy were amazed. There was a large artificial lake by the entrance to the magnificent building, along with tennis courts and a high-end supermarket. The place was packed with people who were interested in buying one of the condos. Rachel told them that each place had its own private swimming pool, but there was also a health club if you were interested. "Our goal was to make this neighborhood self-sufficient. Everything you need is right here on the property," Rachel said in a slightly promotional tone. Just as she was about to take Lily and Dorothy to see the rest of the facilities, a Rolls-Royce limousine pulled up at the entrance. Ellen and Susan got out of the car with the help of the driver, but they were dressed in such ordinary clothing that everyone stopped to watch. They looked like they didn't fit in, not just the car, but the entire complex. A moment later, a few women quickly ran out of the building. Two of them took some bags of groceries out of the Rolls-Royce's trunk, and the others stood beside Kevin's parents. Miss Wilson had arranged for all this while Kevin was recovering from his injuries. She got in touch with Rachel and requested that she reserve the best condo in the place for Alan and Susan so they could move in after they were discharged from the hospital. I thought we'd see someone with class, but it's just that loafer's trashy parents, Dorothy said with a mocking smile as she walked toward them. Mom, what are you doing? You're embarrassing me, Lily cried out as she tried to stop her mother. Rachel didn't understand what was going on and she watched the scene awkwardly. She was thinking to herself, aren't these Kevin's parents? They're related to Dorothy, so why is she acting like they're bitter enemies? Ellen barely looked at Dorothy, and Susan ignored her completely as they walked into the building with the help of the two women. What are you doing? Don't you know how expensive this place is? You'll just get it dirty, Dorothy reprimanded them harshly. What did you say? Ellen replied in an unfriendly tone of voice. You know what I'm talking about. Your useless son is still in jail, and you won't be able to live here much longer, Dorothy sneered. Leave me alone, my son is innocent, Ellen angrily retorted. Ellen and Susan hadn't talked to Kevin about it yet, but they knew their son wouldn't do such a horrible thing. There was something fishy about the whole matter. My daughter was foolish to marry someone as worthless as that trash son of yours, Dorothy complained. Susan saw that her husband was getting angry and said softly, Ellen, let's go inside. We can't just get along with someone like this. She didn't understand how someone who looked so elegant can always say such rotten things. I'm coming, Ellen replied as he turned around and walked into the building and headed toward their elevator. He was too tired to deal with Dorothy. You should have stayed on your dirty old farm, Dorothy said with a sneer. Do you really let people like them live here? Dorothy asked Rachel with a perplexed look on her face. Then Dorothy added, I want the condo they're staying in. Get someone to chase Kevin's parents out so we can move in. I'm very sorry, Dorothy. They bought their condo 10 days ago. Why don't you take a look at a different one? Rachel tried to explain. This was a very embarrassing situation. They actually live here? How is that even possible? Dorothy asked in disbelief. Lily also looked at Rachel in shock. She didn't know Ellen and Susan well, but she more or less knew their financial situation. How much did they pay? We'll offer more, Dorothy offered impatiently. I'm sorry, Dorothy, but I can't do that, Rachel said very apologetically. You're the vice president of this place. What do you mean you can't do that? Dorothy asked indignantly. There's nothing I can do about it. Before the building was complete, I was told to reserve the best unit for Mr. and Mrs. Williams, Rachel said as she smiled awkwardly. Then she offered, there are a lot of other units still available with beautiful views and amenities. Why don't we go look at them? Who told you to do that? Lily suddenly asked. But Lily had already thought of one possibility. It obviously had something to do with Kevin, but she shuddered to think of who might have helped them. Since when did Kevin know someone who was so powerful? Lily, please don't make things so difficult for me, Rachel begged her. She was afraid of revealing Kevin's true identity. Lily lightly nodded her head as she thought about Rachel's difficult position, but she still wondered. Could it be Dalton Steele? But Lily was actually interested in living in the best condo in the building. The location was great and it was close to transportation, plus it would only increase in value. It was nearly 6 o'clock and almost all of Chicago's upper crust would soon be arriving at the banquet at the Salix Leaf Hotel. It was a highly anticipated event to kick off the Foreign Film Festival. There was a lot of commotion because Williams Media had announced that their CEO would be there in person, and everyone knew that the CEO, whoever they were, had a close relationship with Mitchell Cook and other prominent Chicagoans. Nobody wanted to miss this event. Plus, they were aware of everything that Williams Media had done to help straighten out the recent economic crisis. They had even gotten the KWTD Corporation to help the city, and they had spent a fortune to protect Chicago's economy. So the reputation of Williams Media had grown exponentially, but what everyone really wanted was to kiss up to the company's CEO. At 6:30, a long black Porsche Panamera stretch limo pulled up at the entrance of the hotel. When Brittany and Charity got out of the car, the crowd roared. The place was jumping and paparazzi were swarming Williams Media's latest stars. The crowd was clamoring for autographs and shouting how much they loved them both. While everyone was focused on Brittany and Charity, a well-dressed man in sunglasses stepped out of the limo and accompanied the two women as they walked toward the hotel's entrance. At first, a lot of people thought that he was their bodyguard. Then they started to realize that he was probably Williams Media's CEO. Under the watchful eyes of Brittany and Charity's fans, Kevin guided them through the throngs, stopping now and then to exchange a few words with some of the onlookers. A lot of very prominent people were doing their best to make a good impression on him, pushing through the crowd to offer him projects and invite him to dine with them. Kevin smiled politely and chatted with a few of them as he and his companions continued to make their way to the banquet. Just then, the three of them heard someone call to Brittany, "Long time no see, my dear. I miss you so much." They all looked over and saw a young man holding a glass of wine with an evil smile on his face. He was walking over toward Brittany. Kevin frowned slightly when he saw the man. "I didn't expect to meet you here, my sweet. Would you like to have a long talk with me tonight?" The man smiled lewdly. "Sorry, I'm not free this evening," Brittany replied coldly. "Are you so busy these days that you don't have time for me? You know advertising is very important in this business," the man said conceitedly. The rude man thought that Kevin was just Brittany's bodyguard, so he didn't pay any attention to him. "So you're the one who did it," Brittany said as her smile turned into a scowl. "So what if I did?" Vito Booker said arrogantly. "I told you last time we met that no woman I like can reject me if they want to keep working in the entertainment industry." Then Vito continued with a lascivious look in his eyes. "But you know I can always change my mind if you're willing to change yours." This infuriated Brittany. If she hadn't been so worried about offending the man, she would have poured her glass of wine over his head. Kevin had finally had enough of this and said, "Someone should do something about this stray dog. Chicago has leash laws, you know." He didn't really care what the guy might say to him. When Kevin arrived at the banquet with Brittany and Charity, everyone thought he was just their bodyguard. Then some of them realized he was the CEO of Williams Media. As they got near the entrance while all the paparazzi were snapping photos, Vito Booker got Brittany's attention and tried to pressure her to go out with him. Kevin didn't hesitate to insult the man. Vito's facial expression changed instantly. He stared at Kevin fiercely and said, "Who the hell are you talking to? Don't think that you're just special because you're at Brittany's side. You're just a stinking bodyguard." "Please show more respect, Mr. Booker. You're talking to the CEO of Williams Media," Charity informed him. "What the hell are you talking about? Your CEO is just a spoiled brat who isn't even old enough to grow a beard," Vito sneered. "And what's he doing wearing sunglasses at night? His future doesn't look that bright to me." "And you don't know how to keep your mouth shut," Kevin said angrily. Actually, Kevin had decided to wear sunglasses so that no one could recognize him. He'd almost pulled it off until he ran into this dumbass Vito Booker. "What the hell did you say?" Vito replied furiously. "So what if you're the head of Williams Media? How many connections could a brat who's still wet behind the ears have anyway?" Then Vito got in Kevin's face and shoved his finger in his chest as he shouted, "I'm not afraid to tell you this. If you know what's good for you, you'll turn Brittany over to me right now. Otherwise, Williams Media will disappear from the entertainment industry in a New York minute." The altercation attracted a lot of attention, but no one came forward to stop them. First of all, they knew how much influence Vito had, and second of all, no one knew how powerful Kevin was, so they wisely chose to stay out of it. "If you want to keep your finger, you'll take it back right now," Kevin said coldly. He hated having people scold him like that. "Who do you think you are?" Vito said indignantly as he handed his glass of wine to the woman who was standing at his side. Two burly men immediately walked over and stood next to him. They were security experts that he had spent a large amount of money to hire. "There are too many people out here. If you have the guts, follow me to the men's room," Vito said with a confident sneer. "No problem. Do you really think I'm afraid of you?" Kevin retorted. "It just so happens that I have a score to settle with you." Kevin had been wondering why Brittany was so popular but couldn't get any advertising contracts lately. It was only when he heard Vito threaten her that he understood the source of the problem. If you knew any better, you'd be very afraid right now. But if you're foolish enough to face me, I'll be waiting for you, Vito warned him. Then he left with his men. When the crowd saw this, they all shook their heads. Kevin had led Williams Media brilliantly lately, but he was still very young and they knew how powerful Vito was. In the entire entertainment industry, nobody dared to stand up to him, so a lot of bystanders were worried about the future of Williams Media. It would be a shame for the leading company in Chicago to collapse just like that. However, Kevin wasn't afraid at all. He'd been dealt a good hand, but he just hadn't shown all his cards to the public yet. Also, Kevin could tell that Vito's 2 bodyguards would be no match for him. He could beat them with one hand tied behind his back. "Please, Kevin, don't go!" Brittany tugged on Kevin's arm and pleaded with him as he started walking towards the men's room to fight with Vito. "Kevin, listen to me. Don't let your emotions affect your decisions. The Booker Phoenix Corporation is very powerful in the entertainment industry. We don't want to start any conflict with them." Charity said as she also tried to persuade him. Although she had only been involved in the entertainment industry for a short time, Charity had a general understanding of the situation. She knew very well that Vito wasn't someone you should provoke. "Kevin, let's just forget about it," Brittany urged him. She thought that Kevin was only doing this to stand up for her. "It's okay. We're all adults here. But don't worry. We're not going to fight in a public place like this," Kevin said casually. Before Brittany and Charity could say anything else, Kevin had already headed to the restroom, which made the 2 women very anxious. When he walked through the door, Kevin saw Vito lighting up a cigar. His 2 goons were standing next to him. Then Vito looked at Kevin fearlessly and said, "Since you're the CEO of Williams Media, you must be a reasonable man. Well, I can be reasonable too. We both know you were wrong, so why don't you just apologize and let me have Brittany? Then we can forget this whole thing ever happened." "Jackass!" Kevin growled as he glared at Vito. Then he walked past him to one of the stalls. "You don't know what's good for you, do you?" Vito snarled as he threw a cigar on the floor. His 2 bodyguards moved in to attack Kevin. "Go ahead, but you're only going to embarrass yourselves," Kevin said calmly as he reached out and quickly grabbed one of the men by the wrist. When he twisted it, the sound of bones breaking echoed throughout the tiled room. The man screamed in pain and dropped to his knees. Kevin tossed him aside and stopped the other man's fist at the same time. He redirected the blow to throw the man against the wall. He struck it so hard that he knocked some of the tiles loose. Before the man could react, Kevin grabbed him and threw him so hard that he flew across the bathroom and slammed into Vito. "Get off me, you clumsy bastard!" Vito roared as he tried to push his bodyguard off of him. But as soon as Vito got to his feet, Kevin turned around and kicked him in the gut. This sent him sprawling on the bathroom floor where he just lay there in a daze. Kevin put his foot on Vito's back and asked him sarcastically, "Are you having fun yet, Vito?" "Damn it!" Vito roared at his bodyguards. "What the hell am I paying you guys for?" The 2 men were in such pain they struggled to stand up. When they were about to attack Kevin again, he calmly asked them, "Do you really want to go through that again?" Hearing this, the 2 of them stopped in their tracks and looked at Kevin with fear in their eyes. They had never felt such power. "You're both useless," Vito said as he fought with all his strength to stand up. However, Kevin was still holding him down with his foot, and in frustration he yelled, "You bastard! Williams Media's finished now, and so are you." "Is that so?" Kevin replied as he bent down and lifted Vito off the ground. "And just how are you going to do that?" Then Kevin punched Vito in the stomach, making the man's face twist in agony. "Have you ever had a swirly?" Kevin said as he kicked open the door to one of the toilet stalls. He dragged Vito straight into it. "What are you going to do, you son of a bitch?" Vito gritted his teeth and roared, "You'll know soon." Kevin answered as he grabbed Vito by the hair and shoved his head into the bowl. What made it worse was that the water had that blue disinfectant in it. Vito struggled desperately to pull his face out of the toilet bowl. Kevin suddenly let go of the man's head and took a step back. Vito was relieved to get some air. He turned around and yelled at Kevin with hatred in his eyes. You're a dead man. Vito stood there with his smug face and his designer suit dripping from blue toilet water, wishing he could cut Kevin into pieces. He'd never suffered such humiliation since the day he was born. What are you still standing there for? If this guy doesn't die right now, then I'll damn sure kill the two of you, Vito shouted at his bodyguards. Some of the blue toilet water must have dripped into Vito's mouth. It tasted so disgusting that he immediately puked. After hearing this threat to their lives, the two goons overcame their fear of Kevin and attacked him again. Don't say I didn't warn you, Kevin growled as he moved to meet their attack. He grabbed the first man by the head and bounced him off the bathroom wall. Then he kneed the guy between the legs. The man's eyes rolled up into his head and he dropped to the floor. It hurt so much he couldn't even scream. Kevin didn't stop there. He quickly turned around and kicked the other man in the crotch, dropping him to the floor in the fetal position. Finally, Kevin walked back over to Vito. He plugged his nose and said, "You know, Mr. Booker, you really could use a bath." "Just wait and see. You're a dead man," Vito growled. "I know. You already said that a minute ago. This is getting kind of boring," Kevin said as he kneed Vito in the crotch. He immediately dropped to the floor and growled, "You son of a bitch!" "Such language," Kevin said mockingly. "You know, I think I need to wash your mouth out." Then Kevin grabbed Vito by the collar and pushed his head into the toilet again. While this was going on, Brittany and Charity were anxiously waiting outside the bathroom door. When they heard all the screaming, they were tempted to rush in. "Charity, why don't we just go inside and take a look?" Brittany said in a soft voice. "But it's the men's room and there are so many people around," Charity said hesitantly. Even though she said that, she was very worried about Kevin. "But we really can't wait any longer," Brittany said anxiously. She really wanted to make sure that Kevin was all right. Charity took a deep breath and seemed to have made up her mind. "Let's go." The two women looked around and opened the men's room door. "Mr. Williams, are you okay?" Brittany asked worriedly as she entered the room. But when they saw the scene in the bathroom, their jaws almost dropped to the floor. Vito's entire upper body was stained with blue toilet water. He was draped across the toilet bowl, moaning in pain. His two bodyguards were lying on the floor, writhing around. Kevin was just standing casually in front of one of the urinals, whistling while he peed. Vito's goons had interrupted him when he walked in the room earlier. "What the heck are you two doing in here?" Kevin asked when he saw the women. Charity and Brittany were stunned for a second before they both let out a scream. Even though he was facing the other way, they covered their eyes and ran out. They were both thinking the same thing. "We really shouldn't have gone in there. How embarrassing." "Do you still want to keep playing this game, Vito?" Kevin asked coldly as he walked over to the men. Please let me go. It's all my fault. I won't bother Brittany anymore," Vito sobbed. He wasn't only afraid of more pain and humiliation, Vito was genuinely afraid for his life. But he had also decided that once he got out of there, he would find a way to destroy Williams Media and make Kevin pay for this beating. "Why weren't you this cooperative earlier?" Kevin said as he shook his head and walked out of the men's room. When he got back to the hotel lobby, Kevin looked around, but he couldn't find Brittany and Charity. "Damn it," Kevin said to himself. "Now I also smell like disinfectant." He wished he could change his clothes. Kevin took out his phone to send a text to Brittany as he was heading toward the door. On the way, he accidentally bumped into a woman and dropped his phone. As he stooped down to pick his phone up off the floor, he heard someone scolding him. "Why don't you watch where you're going?" the woman snarled coldly. "Do you know how expensive my clothes are? Could you even afford to have them cleaned?" "Well, didn't you also bump into me?" Kevin said in amazement. "What kind of security guard are you? How dare you blame Miss Maya Hughes after bumping into her? Do you want to lose your job?" The woman's assistant berated him. "You're threatening my job," Kevin said calmly. "I've never heard of Maya Hughes. Are you sure she could make me lose my job?" "Where are you from? You don't know who Miss Hughes is," the assistant replied coldly. "Have you heard of the Booker Phoenix Corporation? She's the most popular celebrity in all of Booker Phoenix." Kevin laughed when he heard this. Whoever this woman was, she was only one of their clients. After what he just did to Vito Booker, why would he be afraid of one of the man's underlings? This was turning into quite a fun evening. When Kevin left the men's room of the St. Leaf Hotel after beating up Beto and his men, he didn't see Charity or Brittany anywhere, so he pulled out his phone to text Brittany but bumped into a woman. She turned out to be Maya Hughes, one of Booker Phoenix's clients, and she was very snooty to him. She thought he was a bodyguard and threatened to have him fired. So, the Booker Phoenix Corporation is really that powerful, Kevin asked her. Their raised voices started to draw a small crowd. The people who were watching their argument were shocked to hear Kevin talking to her like that. They knew how important she was in the entertainment industry. Maya was so angry that her voice started to tremble. Is there something wrong with you? Don't you have any manners? She was scheduled to go on stage and sing a few of her new songs later, but it lost her diamond bracelet. When Kevin bumped into her, she was anxiously looking for it. Kevin seemed like a good target for her to vent her anger. Just then, Beto limped out of the men's room with some help from his bodyguards. He'd cleaned himself off, but he still smelled pretty horrible. Needless to say, he was no longer in the mood for a banquet. He was actually heading to the hospital to see if he needed to get his stomach pumped and to make sure he didn't have any permanent injuries. On the way to the exit, he was stopped by Maya, who called him over urgently. "Mr. Booker, please come help me." As Maya walked up to Vito, she picked up on his awful smell. She immediately covered her mouth and nose in disgust and subconsciously took a step back. "What's wrong?" Vito asked awkwardly. She really just wanted to vent her anger some more. "This oaf of a security guard knocked me over and then said it was my fault." "I'll teach the guy a lesson," Vito replied as he started to get angry. Just about everyone in the entertainment industry knew that Beto was a lech. He'd had an affair with just about every female client who worked with his company. Maya was next on his list, even though she didn't know it yet. "That's great, Vito," Maya said as her face lit up. She turned around and pointed at Kevin, who was standing nearby. "It's that blockhead." "Him?" Beto asked awkwardly. His bodyguards were as stunned as he was. Beto obviously hadn't gotten over what had just happened in the men's room. After all, he was on the way to the hospital to get checked out. "Mr. Booker, I think there must be something wrong with how your company manages its clients. They can be very rude," Kevin said with a sneer. The onlookers were shocked to hear him say this and started whispering to each other. Maya put her hands on her hips and said, "Vito, I want you to do something about this right now. If you don't throw him out in the street immediately, I'll be too upset to go on stage." "Shut up," he interrupted her. "Him again," Vito thought to himself. "I'd better not provoke the guy right now. I'll get my revenge later." "Why are you being so mean to me, Vito? It was clearly his fault," Maya said in confusion. Vito was usually so friendly to her. Why was he scolding her to defend a lowly security guard? Seeing Kevin smile at him, Vito took a deep breath, and while still feeling the pain from the beating he'd just gotten, he put his hand on Maya's shoulder and walked her over to Kevin. "Do you know who this person is?" Vito snarled. "This is the CEO of Williams Media. You're messing with the wrong guy. Just hurry up and apologize to Mr. Williams. And if he doesn't accept your apology, we're canceling your contract," Vito explained to her. Maya felt her legs grow weak. She suddenly realized that she'd been insulting someone very important for her career, not just some random security guard. "I'm sorry, sir. I really shouldn't have spoken to you like that," Maya said meekly. Everyone who saw this happen started to chatter. When they realized that Kevin was actually one of the guests of honor at the banquet, they felt extremely lucky to see him in person. But some of them were still shocked that Kevin had been able to unnerve Vito like that. "I don't have time for people like you," Kevin said calmly as he walked out of the hotel lobby. Now Vito really wanted to get revenge. A few minutes later, Kevin got to the underground parking garage. Suddenly, he felt someone hit him from behind and he blacked out. A while later, Kevin opened his eyes again. He was surprised to see that he was in handcuffs. He was even more surprised to see Gwen Archer sitting on the sofa holding a glass of red wine. "So, you're finally awake," Gwen said to him as she swirled the wine in her glass. "Miss Archer, why have you done this? Have you forgotten that I saved your life?" Kevin asked her. He was bewildered by the whole situation. It's true that you saved my life, but I also gave you the ingredients that you use for the pill that helped you make so much progress. So as I see it, we're even, Gwen said with a straight face. Okay, Kevin replied. As long as our debt is settled, then what am I doing here? Do you have a crush on me? Kevin asked playfully. A second later, Gwen threw her glass of wine in Kevin's face. Are you sure you don't know, or are you just pretending not to know? Gwen asked as she stood up and looked down at Kevin. That's some good wine, Kevin said pleasantly. Chateau Lafite Rothschild 1982, isn't it? My brother sent his men to catch Dalton Steele's wife Miranda, but you stopped them just when they were about to get their hands on her. Gwen explained as she took a knife off the side table and pointed it at Kevin. Then she continued, I didn't know you were this bold. Did you think you could get away with interfering in Archer family business? Kevin frowned as he looked at the knife in her hand. Dalton's like a brother to me, and your people attacked his wife right in front of me. What was I supposed to do? I expected you to stay out of our affairs, she answered coldly. They were both silent for a moment. Kevin knew that Gwen wasn't the kind of person to make empty threats. Finally, it was Kevin who broke the silence. Gwen, don't get carried away. Just because I'm in cuffs, do you think you can do whatever you want with me? Not only did you ruin my brother's plans, but you also injured dozens of our people. Tell me, who got carried away? Gwen asked as she moved her knife even closer to Kevin. If you have the strength to fight back, you should do it now. Otherwise, you'll find out what happens to people who challenge me. Gwen threatened him. I guess I don't have a choice, Kevin said as he took a deep breath and focused his energy. The handcuffs burst from his wrist, and Gwen took a few steps back in astonishment. She almost fell to the floor and her knife skittered across the room. When she stood up again, Kevin was holding the night dagger to her throat. Her henchmen should really have done a better job of searching him. If you have the guts, then go ahead and kill me, she said fearlessly. But keep this in mind. This is my private estate. There are dozens of guards on the property. If they don't hear from me in 2 hours, they'll rush in here and you won't stand a chance against them. Don't try to scare me. Anyway, I'm sure your life is worth more than mine, Kevin said grimly. Are you threatening my life? Gwen interrupted him angrily. Wait a second. I didn't ask to come here. You kidnapped me, Kevin said calmly. The atmosphere in the room suddenly got very tense. Gwen just stared at Kevin, unsure as what to do next. For one thing, she had just seen Kevin's power and focus, so she wasn't going to act rashly. After a long pause, Gwen broke the silence and said, I know I can't do anything to you, but you also wouldn't dare to hurt me. How about we make a deal? Gwen asked him coolly. What do you have in mind? Kevin replied nonchalantly. Thanks to the herbal medicines he'd discovered, there were few people who could hurt him now. In Chicago or even in the entire country. My brother Dominic told me that you sold him a special pill and then gave another one to Quinn, Gwen said as she started to get a greedy look in her eyes. But I'll bet you still have another one. Are you telling me that you went to all this trouble just for that? Kevin said with a smirk. That's right. As long as you give me the pill, I'll pretend that nothing happened today and I'll guarantee that you can leave here safely. Gwen offered. That's all you want? Kevin asked as he reached into his pocket and pulled one out. Give it to me now, she said excitedly. Although Gwen had been training for years, she felt blocked and wasn't making any improvement. Her current level of stamina and focus had helped her expand her business enormously, but she needed something more to get an edge on her competition. When Dominic had told her about all the progress he'd made with Kevin's help, she was obsessed with getting one of the pills for herself. But in spite of all her effort, she'd come up empty-handed. Then she missed the auction that the Pearl family had held, and she was devastated. It just seemed out of reach, even though she would have been willing to spend 10 times what the old gentleman had. Now she saw what she'd been looking for so long, and it was in Kevin's hand. What she didn't expect was for him to casually pop it in his mouth. This instantly made Gwen furious. She wanted to tear Kevin limb from limb. Why did you do that? Gwen roared wildly. You're already too far advanced for it to do anything to help you. What a waste. Suddenly, Kevin saw a flash of steel in front of his eyes. Gwen had pulled a sword from the display stand behind the couch. Kevin moved nimbly and stepped into her blind spot, taking her balance and getting control of the sword, which he took from her hands and threw against the wall, shattering it into pieces. Gwen was furious and shouted, "I'm going to kill you!" As it turns out, the sword was very important to her. She'd found it years ago and had gone to a lot of trouble and expense to make it hers. "Remember, if you kill me, you won't be able to get any other herbal medicine," Kevin said calmly. "Do you have more?" Gwen asked in disbelief. In her research, she'd discovered that pills like the one that Kevin had given her brother were very rare, and you had to be extremely lucky to find one. How could he possibly have more of them? "Not only do I have more, but I can get you as many as you want," Kevin said casually. "You?" Gwen was so shocked that she couldn't finish her sentence. Seeing the surprise on Gwen's face, Kevin didn't waste any more time talking to her. He grabbed a bowl from the table and looked at her confidently. He knew that the ingredients were fairly common. The key to preparing this kind of herbal medicine was the skill of the apothecary who was making it. After spending all that time with his mentor, the Night King, concocting a pill for Gwen Archer would be a piece of cake. "Be careful, that's a very valuable bowl," Gwen warned him. "Do you want the pill, or don't you?" Kevin asked her. Kevin had been kidnapped by Gwen Archer and taken to her estate. She wanted him to give her a pill like the one he'd sold to her brother Dominic. Kevin broke his restraint, and after some struggling and heavy negotiating, he agreed to use his skills to make her a pill. Using common ingredients that were in Gwen's home, Kevin knew that he could concoct the correct herbal medicine for her. "This is going to take a while," Kevin said as he adjusted the temperature of the burner. It had to be just right. Before his training with the Night King, he needed nearly 2 hours to refine something like this, but now he could do it in less than half an hour. The moment the bowl shattered, a rich fragrance filled the entire room and 4 pills rolled onto the table. "You know how to concoct pills?" Gwen said in surprise as she looked at Kevin. "This is the first pill that I ever made. When I started, I didn't really know what it was, but you could call it the power pill." Kevin smiled as he picked up 3 of the pills and held them in his hand. "Give me one," Gwen said excitedly. Her eyes were filled with envy. She wanted to snatch all the pills from Kevin's palm. "Do you want it that badly?" Kevin said with a smile as he put the 3 pills into his mouth at the same time and started to chew. At his current level of development, a power pill wouldn't be much of use to him. Even if he ate them like candy, they wouldn't have much of an effect. "Why did you take them?" Gwen asked angrily as she stomped her feet like a little kid. However, she didn't dare to grab the 4th pill. She was afraid that Kevin would swallow that one too. "Even though I know how to prepare power pills, I can't give them away to others that easily." Kevin sneered as he picked up the last one and held it in his hand. "I'm sorry, Kevin. I shouldn't have sent someone to bring you here against your will. Please forgive me," Gwen begged him in desperation. "Please have pity on me and give me this last pill. I'll pay you whatever you want." "It's not about the money," Kevin explained. "The problem is that I really don't like getting hit on the head." "Then how about we even the score?" Gwen said as she picked up the knife that had fallen to the floor earlier and offered it to Kevin by the handle, with the blade pointing at her. "Forget it. You're too weak right now. I was afraid that I'd hurt you," Kevin replied as he casually tossed her the pill. Kevin knew very well that he was on Gwen's turf. The place was filled with guards who would give their lives for her. If he didn't give her the pill, he'd have a heck of a time getting out of there unharmed. It was one thing to fight one-on-one with somebody, but it was entirely different to deal with dozens of people at once. The best that he could hope for was to get out alive. Gwen swallowed the pill without any hesitation at all. This was just a start. She had bigger plans in mind. "Can I leave now?" Kevin asked coolly. Gwen didn't answer his question. Instead, she sat down on the sofa and gestured for him to take a seat too. "What are you doing?" Kevin asked curiously. He had no idea where this was going. Kevin, I want to ask you to teach me herbal medicine, Gwen said directly. You want to learn to be an apothecary? Kevin asked in surprise. When he got over the shock, he frowned and thought to himself, did she just say that she wants me to teach her? If she learned this skill, what could happen in the future? Yes, I sincerely want you to be my teacher, she quickly replied. But I'm not prepared to take on a student right now, and it would take a lot of effort. Just forget about it, Kevin explained. He had some misgivings and decided it was better to turn her down. I'm not afraid to make the effort. As long as I can learn how to concoct pills, you can ask me to do anything, Gwen pleaded as she leaned towards Kevin hopefully. Seeing her like this, Kevin was starting to have a hard time saying no. I'll follow whatever instructions you have and I'll offer you all my support in the future, she told him. Gwen had only one thought. If she could learn to be an apothecary, the sky would be the limit. Not only would she be able to improve herself by leaps and bounds, but she could move past any plateaus and get an advantage on all of her competition. After all, there were a lot of other rich and powerful people trying to do the same thing. Give me some time to think about it, Kevin said reluctantly. Really? So you're willing to think about it? Gwen asked excitedly. Don't get too excited. I just said I'd think about it, Kevin replied cautiously. That's okay. I'm sure you'll say yes, Gwen replied as she stood up from the couch with a big smile on her face. Can I leave now? Kevin asked grumpily. Of course you can, Professor, Gwen said very sincerely. Kevin looked at Gwen thoughtfully before walking out the door. The reason he said he'd consider her request instead of rejecting it outright was that he suddenly had an idea. If he could unite all the rich and powerful families in Chicago and build his own power base, he could turn the entire city into his personal territory, a kind of empire. Wouldn't that help him solve all his problems once and for all? This was about more than just herbal medicine. Not long after he left Gwen's estate, Kevin made his way back town. As he was walking toward his building, he suddenly ducked into an alley. Must have been hard for you to follow me all the way here, Kevin exclaimed as he leaned against the wall. However, when he finished speaking, nobody answered him and he couldn't see anyone following him. Why don't you just show yourself? Kevin said grouchily. Then he heard some movement and a shadowy figure suddenly stepped out from the darkness. The man looked ordinary, but Kevin sensed something very dangerous about him. Who are you? Kevin asked as his body tensed up. The Night King had told him this might happen. He should always be on the alert and not get careless. My wife has asked me to extend an invitation to you, the man said very frostily. The way he looked at Kevin was extremely cold, as if he had no feelings at all. It's getting late. Why don't we do this another day? Kevin replied bluntly. It's not up to you, the man said as he started to move toward Kevin. He took a step forward and reached for Kevin's neck. Sensing just how dangerous this man was, Kevin quickly retreated. He knew that his only chance of escape was to run out into the street. Kevin had actually felt that he was being followed from the moment he stepped out of Gwen Archer's mansion. That was why he walked into the alley. He wanted to lure the guy out of hiding, but he didn't expect him to be so strong. Although Kevin moved quickly, the man was even faster and he appeared in front of him in the blink of an eye. There's no use resisting, the man sneered as he grabbed Kevin's collar. His grip was like iron, and no matter how hard Kevin tried, he couldn't budge him. Get lost, Kevin yelled as he threw a powerful punch. The man abruptly let go of Kevin's shirt and slid his palm along his wrist. Then he deftly redirected his punch toward the wall. Kevin's fist smashed into the bricks. When he pulled his arm back, he felt something sting him in the neck. In less than 3 seconds, Kevin closed his eyes and fell to the ground. I don't care how strong he's gotten. He obviously doesn't have enough combat experience, the man said as he lifted Kevin up from the ground and put him on his shoulder. He hurried to a long black sedan that was waiting nearby. When Kevin woke up, he was in a daze. As he tried to stand up, he found that he'd been tied up and left on the floor. What the hell is this? He thought to himself, not again. Being tied up twice in one day made Kevin feel very upset. Where am I this time? Kevin wondered as he looked around the room, trying to find a clue to his location. Soon he spotted a sign in the hallway. Written in red and black letters, he saw the words, "The Alliance." I always wondered what the Alliance headquarters looked like, Kevin said to himself with a slight smirk. Ever since he'd met Marshall, Kevin had been finding out as much as he could about the Alliance. Their headquarters was in a wooded area not too far from Chicago. It was originally supposed to be a housing development, but for some unknown reason the construction had stopped midway, and the Alliance ended up turning it into their center of operations. They were into a lot of activities, both criminal and legitimate, and this was a good arrangement for them. As far as anyone knew, it was just private land where nobody dared to trespass. Just then, the man who had tied Kevin up walked into the room. "You woke up pretty quickly from that knockout cocktail." Kevin frowned slightly when he heard this. He knew from his studies that this concoction didn't have any lethal properties, but it could render someone unconscious in under 10 seconds if they weren't strong enough. "Since you're awake, you should come with me to see my wife," the man said as he quickly undid all of the ropes that had been tied around Kevin's wrists and ankles. "Who are you? Why did you bring me here?" Kevin asked cautiously. "You'll find out soon enough," the man said as he led Kevin outside and headed for one of the other buildings in the woods. Kevin stretched his numb hands and feet before following him. He was glad to be freed from the ropes, but he knew that he wasn't free to leave. Since this was the Alliance headquarters, there would naturally be many experts around. He knew that he didn't yet have the skill to deal with them, so he was stuck here for now. Along the way, Kevin was stunned by the surrounding scenery. There were all kinds of exotic herbs and flowers growing on both sides of the road. Imagine the medicines I can make with all of this, Kevin thought to himself. He decided that he would pick some of these herbs before he left. It was worth the risk. About 10 minutes later, Kevin was stunned when they stepped into a clearing. No one would have thought that the Alliance would erect such a magnificent building in the middle of the woods. As he followed the man up the stairs and into the building, Kevin saw some very dangerous people. They gave him some really bad vibes. As he entered the main hall, Kevin saw a woman sitting in an enormous chair. It wasn't a throne, but it had the same feel. She was wearing a light purple dress with a very high collar that partially obscured her face. There were dozens of people standing in a semicircle around her. Kevin assumed that they were among the Alliance's elite, their very best members. While Kevin was looking at the woman, someone said firmly to him, "Well, what are you waiting for? Step up and meet the director." Kevin felt a hand push him forward until he was standing in front of her. "Good afternoon, Director," Kevin greeted her anxiously. He knew that in the Alliance, the executive director's wife often stood in for him and had a comparable rank. They were in the habit of using titles that made their organization sound more like a legitimate business. It was obviously a big deal for Kevin to be brought in for this meeting, but he was well aware that he had absolutely no rank in this room. "Are you Kevin Williams?" the director asked in a very powerful and dignified tone that you couldn't help but respect. "Yes, I am," Kevin replied as he nodded his head. "Do you know why I invited you here?" she asked him. "To tell you the truth, I have no idea," Kevin answered honestly. But inside he was thinking, "Invited? I was followed, drugged, and tied up." Kevin was also worried about something else. In his training, he'd learned a lot of the Alliance's secret recipes and techniques. It would be really bad for him if these people ever found out. "You don't have to be so reserved. I called you here to ask you something very important," the director said quietly. "Did you save a few women from the myriads recently?" Kevin was stunned when he heard this. Of course he remembered doing that, but he didn't know why the director of the Alliance would be interested in it. "Did you know who these women were? Why did you let them go for no reason?" she asked plainly. To tell you the truth, they were in real trouble. I let them go because I knew they were in the Sideros Alliance, which is connected to you, and I was concerned with their safety. Did something happen to them after they left? Kevin asked in confusion. No, they're fine. But you may not have known that they were candidates for promotion to the position of administrator in the Alliance. They're very important to us, the director explained. That's why I had you brought here. I'd like to reward you, she said pleasantly. Kevin's face lit up when he heard her say this. He knew that in the Alliance they had a director, several administrators, and 4 kings. The title of king was a holdover from the days before they tried to sound more businesslike. They used to be called kingpins. His mentor, the Night King, was one of them. But Kevin was probably the only one in the room who had ever seen his face. Strangely enough, the people in these positions rarely use their given names with anyone, just their titles. Kevin had never expected his act of kindness to the women to have had such important consequences. Kevin was unsure what would happen when he was led in front of the Alliance's director. He was relieved to find out that she wanted to reward him for saving the candidates for the position of administrator from the myriads the other day. Then the director said, I heard from Marshall that you've been very helpful to him in recent months. I've done my best, Kevin replied humbly. From what I've heard about your current skill level, you show great promise as an apothecary. So I've decided to give you the title of messenger in our alliance. The director said as she gestured for someone to bring something over to Kevin. One of her assistants handed him a platinum signet ring. Everyone in the hall had their eyes on Kevin. Most of them were filled with jealousy. The members of the alliance knew that the title of messenger was almost as important as the one of the kingpins. In addition to that, the messenger had the authority to mobilize resources and also carry out the director's will. But before Kevin could touch the ring, a man suddenly stood up. He respectfully acknowledged the director and then he said, Madam Director, I feel that Kevin is both immoral and incompetent. He is unqualified to be messenger. Then he looked at Kevin with disdain. He was the Sergeant-at-Arms King, one of the Alliance's 4 kings. He had made countless contributions after joining the Alliance 30 years ago. Naturally, he had many supporters in the organization. I would like you to reconsider. The messenger's position is extremely important to us. We can't let a newcomer take on the role, he sneered. I think that although Kevin has made a great contribution, he is too young. I would only allow him to take this position once he's had more experience, he continued. Young people tend to be too impulsive. Besides, Kevin doesn't yet have a strong enough reputation to take on this responsibility. Nearly half of the people in the room agreed with him and pleaded with the director to rescind her order. Are you doubting my judgment? The director replied coldly. Please calm down, Madam Director. I wouldn't dare to insult you. But he can't be promoted to this position, he pleaded. Kevin saved our administrator candidates and has made great contributions to our alliance. And now that he has been trained as an apothecary, he's already qualified to be our new messenger. Besides that, his mentor is the Night King. Do you still think that he isn't qualified? The director explained. This last bit of information shocked the members. The Night King had been absent for years and they had no idea that he had taken on a pupil. It seems like the Alliance really has a lot of information about me. How did they find out about my training with the Night King? Kevin thought to himself as he listened to them whispering to each other. But he wasn't surprised that the director knew he could make herbal medicine. After all, he had saved Miranda in front of everyone at the campsite. Word was bound to spread. But how many of them believed in his skill? Do you have any objections now? The director asked the Sergeant-at-Arms King. Since Kevin is the Night King's pupil, I naturally have no objections, he answered fearfully. Then this matter will be decided, the director said as she stood up with her 2 assistants. Kevin, come with me. There is an important matter for you to attend to. Of course, Kevin said excitedly. He'd never thought that he would end up in such a prestigious position. As dozens of people watched, Kevin followed the director's assistants through a large door. It led to a room that was filled with a delicate fragrance. The director gestured for the two women to leave her alone with Kevin. "Since you're the Night King's pupil, you should have heard about the poison pill," the director said as she removed her collar so that Kevin could see her face clearly. When Kevin saw how beautiful she was, he was so stunned that he forgot to answer her question. "Do you realize that the Alliance would have you punished for looking at me like that?" she said sternly. "I'm sorry, but I was distracted for a second by your beauty," Kevin awkwardly apologized. "Since it's your first offense, I'll let it pass. For now, we have something more important to deal with. The poison pill," the director said lightly. "Anyone who joins the Alliance has to take one. If they don't take the antidote in time, they will not survive. Only the executive director and the Night King can prepare the antidote for the poison pill," she continued to explain. "But the executive director has been unavailable for the past 2 weeks and the Night King has always been elusive. The people you just saw in the main hall will take the poison pill in less than 3 days. So it will be up to you to make the antidote," the director explained as she looked closely at Kevin. "So you want me to prepare a poison antidote?" Kevin asked with some doubt. "Well, it's not exactly an antidote," she clarified. "We use the poison pill to control the members and assure their loyalty to the Alliance. It's not easy to do this because of the pill's side effects. So what you need to do is to refine a medicinal pill that suppresses the toxicity of the poison pill, and not the actual antidote. Do you understand?" At this point, the director's eyes suddenly flashed with a touch of doubt, and she asked him, "Could it be that the Night King didn't teach you this?" "Of course my mentor taught me this, but I wonder if the proper medicinal herbs are stored in the headquarters?" Kevin asked with a faint smile. "That's easy. There are herbs and flowers everywhere on the property. In fact, there's an inexhaustible supply. You can go and pick them as you wish," the director replied. Then her expression suddenly turned serious. "But you can't mess this up. If you do, you'll pay with your life." "Rest assured, Madam Director, I won't let you down," Kevin replied happily. The reason he'd asked about the herbs earlier was to have the director's permission to go outside and properly pick the ingredients that he needed. "Go now," the director said as she gestured for Kevin to leave. "Come and find me when you're ready." Kevin left the room and headed outside. After about 2 hours, he had picked a lot of herbs and flowers that were growing all around the building. "I should bring Marshall back and show him all of this," Kevin said to himself excitedly. He had found all sorts of exotic ingredients. Some of them were necessary for the pills that he was about to prepare for the Alliance members, but others could be used for things that the Night King hadn't taught him yet and he knew that he wanted to make. Kevin found what he needed to reduce the effects of the poison pill. Then he headed over to the director's residence. As he walked in the door, he heard the sound of someone hyperventilating. "What's she doing?" Kevin wondered. He carefully walked to the door and knocked on it a few times. "Is that you, Kevin? Come in quickly." The director sounded a little anxious. When Kevin walked into the room, he froze on the spot. The director was curled up on her bed. Her long dress was soaked with sweat and her thighs were exposed a little. She was having trouble breathing. Kevin was immediately concerned and asked her, "Madam Director, have you taken the poison pill?" "I've been very busy lately, so I forgot that I took the poison pill a few days earlier than everyone else. Have you found any herbs that can counteract the poison?" she asked weakly. "I found them. Do you want me to make it for you immediately?" Kevin asked her. "You'll have to tie me up first. I'm afraid that the side effects will be too strong and I may hurt myself," she said while gritting her teeth. She felt as if there were tens of thousands of fire ants crawling over every part of her body. "I'll do what I can," Kevin said as he took a deep breath and closed the door. He found some scarves and tied the director to her chair. Next, Kevin found a bowl and began to prepare the antidote. 10 minutes later, the bowl shattered and a pill rolled onto the table. Kevin wiped the sweat from his forehead and picked it up carefully. He walked over to the director and gave her the pill. Then he stepped back and waited for it to take effect. After a half an hour, the director let out a long breath. The painful side effects had subsided, and she said, "I feel like I made a good choice. It looks like you have amazing skills for someone your age." "My mentor has taught me well, but I still have a lot to learn," Kevin said modestly. But then he wondered what else the Night King had left to teach him. "I'm not worried about refining the pill for the rest of the group right now. I have a different task for you," she said pleasantly. Kevin was a little worried. What could it be? Was she going to reward him for helping her? "What do you have in mind?" Kevin asked tentatively. "A month ago, we received news that some of our rival organizations plan to set up a school for the natural healing arts in Chicago. On the surface, it looks like a school to help nurture talented young people, but in reality, it's an attempt to squash our alliance." Her eyes flashed with anger as she said this. "This is a diabolical plan. How could they pretend to be virtuous but do something so vicious?" Kevin asked with righteous indignation. "Rest assured that as long as I'm still breathing, I won't let them succeed." "Well put. We need loyal and passionate men like you," she said with relief. "I was concerned that you wouldn't be willing to attend the school's new campus, but I'm not worried about that anymore." "What? You want me to be a spy?" Kevin was stunned once again. "I know that this is a difficult request, but it's the best time for you to make a contribution that would convince everyone that you're worthy of your new post as messenger." The director replied, "The new school will definitely cause a big stir in Chicago. Lots of rich kids will rush to enroll there. I need you to sneak in and find something for me." "What would you like me to find?" Kevin asked apprehensively. "One of the organizations involved in the school has a new process for herbal preparation that they call consolidation. I want you to learn it and bring it back to us," she told them. "But I'm sure you have people who already know far more about this," Kevin suggested. "Don't be afraid," she interrupted. "For you to complete the mission smoothly, I've prepared a secret manual for you. It's in the box on your left. Open it up and take a look." "Of course," Kevin agreed. He had his doubts, but it was too late to back down now. He opened the box and took out the manual. Kevin was surprised to see that there was also a blood-red pill in the box. "What pill is this?" Kevin wondered out loud. "This is called the condensation pill. It helps to keep your internal energy from being unstable, which can be very dangerous," the director explained. "The pill is there to help you with your mission." Kevin immediately became happy when he heard this. Of course, he had learned about the condensation pill. At this point in his development, it would be very important for him. Otherwise, he might have problems down the road. He might not be ready for it yet, but Kevin was willing to take a chance. Without even thinking, he swallowed the medicinal pill in one gulp. "Hold on," the director quickly stopped him. "The medicinal properties of this pill are extremely powerful. You are supposed to take it while soaking in a mountain spring." "Why didn't you say so earlier?" Kevin said in a panic. Why hadn't he read this in any of his books? There are no mountains near Chicago. "I was about to tell you, but you swallowed it before I had a chance," the director said helplessly. "What will happen if I take it like this? Can it kill me?" Kevin asked sadly. "I have no idea. I've never heard of anyone taking the pill this way." The director shook her head. "Come over here so I can take a look at you." Kevin nodded, but as he was walking over to the director, his face suddenly felt like it was on fire. Very soon, Kevin felt like he was in a furnace and his whole body was burning. But in the next second, he suddenly started shivering. The heat instantly turned cold, and even the air that came out of his mouth and nose was freezing. "This isn't the condensation pill," Kevin said as he fell to the ground, trembling in agony. "This is the madness pill." Suddenly, Kevin felt his body fill with power that needed to be released immediately. After a few minutes, his vision was blurred. He got up shakily from the floor and started to take off his clothes.